welcome to It's an Inside Job BiteSize Fridays, your weekly dose of resilience, optimism, and well-being to get you ready for the weekend. Now, each week, I'll bring you insightful tips and uplifting stories to help you navigate life's challenges and embrace a more positive mindset. And so with that said, let's slip into the stream. Hey folks, welcome back to another BiteSize Friday. I'm your host, Jason Lim. So in this BiteSize episode, I have the privilege of speaking with Dr. Remy Smolinski, a negotiation professor at HHL Leipzig Graduate School of Management. Now, with a focus on negotiation theory and practice in international settings and innovation management, well, Dr. Smolinski brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to our discussion. Now, throughout this bite-sized conversation, we delve into several key points, including negotiation strategies. Now, Dr. Smolinski shares practical negotiation strategies and communication skills, providing us with actionable insights that we can apply in various contexts. He also offers his expert perspective on handling negotiations effectively, which will be invaluable for any of you, any of us looking to improve our skills, our negotiation skills. And of course, he also shares some real-life examples. In our discussion, it is enriched with his real-life examples and anecdotes. And so I hope you enjoy this sound extract from episode 6, season 4. All right, let's slip into the stream and meet Dr. Remy Smolinski.
There is a certain common characteristic of all negotiation situations, and that is that we envision that a potential agreement unlocks value for both of us. Yes. What does this mean? Well, when we finally manage to agree on where and how, right, we will enjoy our time together even better. Yes. This is a very common example for often encountered in relationships, but if we make the transition to business, it looks identically or analogically, right? So we also have situations where buyers and sellers have radically different interests. Right, the buyer wants to spend as little money as she possibly can, whereas the seller wants to maximize his margins. Right, but at the same time, none of them gets anything if they don't manage to find a deal that meets the expectations of both. And so a very common characteristic of interdependence between each other, this interdependence is what unlocks value at the end of the day, right? So the seller might have an object or assets, right, which are redundant or which they want to get rid of or liquidate or exchange for money. Yes. Whereas the buyer has liquid resources, typically money, and a need for those assets. Yes. But none of them gets anything, neither the profit nor the value that could be potentially generated by those assets if they don't find a deal. So interdependence is one common characteristic. Then an intention to come to a deal, and while having differences, different preferences, different interests when it comes to the details of the deal, such as, for example, the destination in the relationship question of a vacation question, or, for example, price, very common negotiation in sales or procurement.
I think one of the words you said is negotiations. You know, the pretext of a negotiation is at some level a conflict, different interests. We come from different backgrounds. For many of us, there is a negative connotation to the word conflict. If we were to broaden the perspective of conflict, how should we look at conflict above and beyond sort of the negative connotations or aspects of that definition of the word?
Yes, Jason, thank you for this question, because yes, indeed, at the core of every negotiation, there is a conflict. Yes, I describe it as a conflict between preferences, but this can be how do I say it, more or less intensive, right? It can be just a pretext to a dialogue about what's important to you, or it can be a highly emotional, sometimes even coercive conflict, like the one that we are experiencing in Ukraine, right? So when it comes to conflict, whenever there are two individuals who have different preferences, they are experiencing conflict. The intensity of conflict varies or may vary, right? And I keep saying during my training and my lectures, my courses, that it is not the frequency of conflict that is wrong or bad. Conflict can be constructive. Conflict can lead to, discovering more about each other. Conflict can be creative. Might lead to developing new solutions. Conflict might, even strengthen relationships. Right. So conflict per se is not bad, or the frequency of conflict is not bad. Yeah. It's our ability to handle it that we can and need to think about, rethink, and master, right? And that's exactly where negotiation kicks in, right? Negotiation allows us to deal with conflict better. Negotiation allows us to transform conflict into something which is constructive, something that is productive, right? So it's not so much the fact of avoiding it or so much of reducing its frequency. Mm-hmm. It's much more transforming, managing it, handling the conflict, right? And this is exactly my little mission, and the mission probably of everyone who deals with negotiation, mediation, right, or other aspects, other ways of resolving conflict. We are there to help people handle the conflict, the differences in preferences between them and their partners.
I think the skill of negotiation itself, it is sort of a verbal martial arts. There are different, if I can call it, belts of skill to be adept at it. For me, negotiation is a key skill. I mean, you don't have to be a top negotiator, but if you understand the fundamentals, because I think moving forward, when we talk about cooperation or collaboration or communication, negotiation is one of those foundational stones that are needed to lead people, to lead ourselves. I mean, because sometimes we need to negotiate with ourselves. And I think what you said was, I liked your definition, how you articulated conflict. If we can see it, you said to see new solutions, to build or strengthen relationships. Because if we get over I think if many of us, who can get over sort of the limited definition of conflict as something negative, as something intrusive, as something abrasive, but see it as, on the other side of the fence, what it will achieve, a better outcome, a better relationship, a better solution. I really like your definition. And I think this reframing can encourage people to have more difficult or hard conversations, whether it's a deal or whether it's working out some sort of professional, personal difference. So I really like that. If I just can shift maybe to broaden the perspective before we kind of do a deeper dive, as a negotiation professor, as someone who has extensive experience, how would you define the essence of a successful negotiation? I mean, what does it mean to negotiate well? I know that's a very open, broad question, but please interpret it as you will.
Thank you, Jason, for asking it. Let us take a step back. Negotiation science is not super old, right? I mean, the first papers were published in the 60s, 70s. A major wave came with Harvard's program on negotiation in the 80s. So we're looking at about 4 decades of research, 4+. Yes. And interestingly enough, in over 40 years, we have not managed to develop a consensus on what it means to negotiate well. And there have been attempts here and there to somehow capture the most important characteristics of superior negotiation results. And let me just try to guide our listeners through some of them. Yes, I think the most important one where it all starts is something what we call a substantive outcome. And substantive outcome is what we get at the end, right? When there's a handshake, is the price that we get, delivery conditions, payment terms, or the destination for our vacation trip, right? Or, I don't know, whatever else we might, or peace treaty, the conditions of a peace treaty, right, between two nations. These are the examples that we tackled, right? And these are the conditions, the terms of an agreement. These are substantive outcomes, right? Sometimes we can measure them, especially in transactional context. Typically, they can have a price tag or value, right? That we can often decipher in money or in code in money, right? And to compare, okay, was it good? Was it not? Sometimes it's non-numerical. It's only based on our subjective perception of the conditions. But nevertheless, substantive outcome is the first dimension. So we know that the buyer that manages to negotiate a lower price is a better negotiator than the buyer who keeps on paying more. Right, but when we think about it, it's kind of short-sighted, right? Especially those of us who are in business know that 80-90% of business relationships are long-term, are not one shot, right? And this means that apparently next to substantive outcome, there must be also something that indicates the strength of that relationship or the quality of that relationship. And this is literature calls it a subjective outcome or relational outcome. And this is something that I believe is also important and needs to be considered, especially in negotiations which are not about, selling a car or buying real estate or, I don't know, buying a used bike on a classified, through a classified service, right? So whenever there's a certain perspective or certain probability that there will be a follow-up negotiation at some point, right, that the relationship is ongoing or repeated, we must include in the measurement of negotiation success or in the measurement of negotiation performance, we must include the impact that our actions, the impact that our communication. One thing that we didn't mention while defining negotiation is that it's also ultimately essentially a communication process, right? So it's the thing that we say or the things that we say, right? And these things have impact on both of these dimensions. So our ability to solve a problem, meaning find the right price or a destination that we can live with, but also, as we're solving the problem, we are building or destroying the relationship. Okay, and these are, let's say, most commonly considered the most important outcomes or the most important measurements of negotiation success. We also, when we run negotiation competitions, we also have a closer look at the process, not only at the outcome, but also at the process, right? Why do we do so? Right? Because negotiation is ultimately a dyadic process, and dyadic interactive process. What does it mean? It involves at least two parties, sometimes more, right? And these two parties respond to each other's actions, to the stimuli that they generate. Yes? And therefore, looking only at the outcome is a little bit, it's a little bit short-sighted because it doesn't include the contributions or doesn't consider the contributions that have been made by the participating party throughout the process. So, and these contributions can differ. As it can be that, the fact that I got a great relational or we got a great relational outcome in a particular negotiation might be completely attributed to the actions of my partner, not mine. Right. So I might just, as a negotiator, might have benefited from my partner's negotiation skill. So what we also do is very often in our negotiation competitions, we have judges who observe the process, and at the end make the shots or call the shots. Who are the ones who manage this process better? But in general, these are the three dimensions that differentiate good negotiation or superior negotiation performance from let's say just outcomes. Looking at the substance, looking at the relationship, and the contribution to those outcomes and the relationship along the process.
If you want more, why not go back and listen to the original full conversation with my guest? You will find the link in the episode in the show notes. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'll be back next week with my long-form conversational episodes on Monday and the latest BiteSize episode on Friday. And have yourself a relaxing and rejuvenating weekend.